Welcome to the Front End Nerdery Podcast, a podcast about front end development and design. I'm your host, Todd Libby. My guests today, plural, are two people you may know very well, and I'm glad we could work this out today and get on the call here. Co-founder of CodePen, Chris Coyier, and lead developer at Paravel, Dave Rupert, and you know them from the Shop Talk show. Guys, how you doing today?
Good.
Wonderful. Great to be here.
Thanks.
Yeah, it is. Really appreciate it, Todd. Yeah. We know what it's like running a podcast about front end nerdery. You just have the cooler name.
It came to me in a dream.
There I was in the desert.
Exactly. How about each of you tell the listeners a little bit more about yourselves? I know, you guys are well known, but go ahead.
Oh, that's cool. You introduced me as the co-founder of CodePen, which I am. So that's most of my day is just working on that app, which is not a spring chicken anymore. We're celebrating our 10th year this year. So we're just a little app for, kind of practicing and building front end code, so nice little synergy with this podcast, I'd say.
Yep.
And lots of people sign up for it and do it. And they do it in all kinds of different contexts, like educationally, they're learning, or they work at some agency and they're testing things or whatever. There's all kinds of different reasons people end up using the app, but they find it some way or another because it was linked up in a Stack Overflow thread, or it was part of their curriculum, or they saw it embedded on CSS Tricks, which is another website I do, that's more of just a blog, and it's me and staff and guest writers, and I'm always kind of looking for content for that. Publish a couple articles a day about front end stuff, usually front end stuff. I mean, I don't venture into back end that much, but it's this name where you'd think it would be a blog about CSS Tricks, but alas, it isn't. It's just about whatever.
Yeah.
And then, of course, me and Dave hang out every week, do the show.
That's right. Every Monday or so, we do Shop Talk show. So I can go. I'm Dave Rupert. I have a blog too, but yeah, it's not as good as Chris's. But then I work at a company called Paravel. We're a web design and development agency based in Austin, Texas. We've kind of just slowly grown the business over the last 14, 15 years. And now we do kind of big websites. And then kind of in addition to that, this year, I've kind of started a whole new company. I'm what it incorporated in Delaware and everything, so called Luro App, and it's just called Luro, but the website is luroapp.com. So we're just kind of starting that, and not really much you can do or anything there yet, but it's just we're kind of starting down that path. So
nice. So now it's time for the hard-hitting questions. So the first one is, for
my parents divorced when I was 10. Sorry, that's
okay. How did you get started in your web development or design journey?
Yeah, I wonder if I could do Dave's and Dave could do mine.
You can do that.
Chris was in university majoring in pottery, and he had some bands, an Irish punk band, and needed a website for that band. So that's what Chris did. Made a website.
Yeah.
With my clothes. Am I close?
Yeah, I think that's pretty much it.
And then you work for Wufoo. So there's a few steps in between there.
Yeah, there's a couple of steps in between there. But now I feel bad because I don't remember yours as clearly, although I know you joke about majoring in anime, which really meant majoring in Japanese and then living in Japan for a minute. And then it may have been when you came back from that, and then but you were always buddies with your fellow co-founders of Paravel for a long time. I think it probably that means high school even. I'm not sure if it
that's correct.
School,
you're right. Yeah.
But high school. And then I'm not sure when the Forge was fired with Paravel exactly though. What is that? Because you did client. It's always been a client work thing. So was Trent getting the clients and then asked you for help? Was it something like that?
Yeah, basically, this is fun. We did each other's stories, but so I've been making websites since I was 15, on AOL pages and stuff, just blogs before there were blogs. It was just I think my first website was called Fart University. I mean, it was really high quality stuff there. But then I made websites for organizations I was a part of, ultimate frisbee teams or whatever, and then like, because I made websites. That's what I did in my spare time and thought about that. And then I majored in Japanese, and then I lived in Japan, and then I taught Trent, and over remotely I taught him how to make websites a lot. And then he had a job making websites, and then I came back from Japan. Reagan and I worked on real estate websites in Phoenix in 2006 and 7, and that did not end up well. Like, that was a bad time for real estate in Phoenix. And so shortly after that, Trent just kind of had some work, and so we started making websites off of that. So, and maybe I think at one point Trent and I made a couple websites for $300 whole. So, but
Ooh.
yeah, big money.
I remember those days. I remember those days. Yeah, I can do that for $200.
Yeah, sure. And then you spend like 8 weeks.
Yeah. I kind of got yelled at early on by I had a neighbor who was like, "Oh, I can tell that, you have the talent to do this particular freelance job." And they hooked me up with some local business. There was a pretty big business that needed some work done. And I because they asked me to my face, like, what my rate was or something. And I can't remember, but it was something like $10 an hour or something. I just spit out because I was totally unprepared to answer that question. And they took me aside and sort of like, you can't do that, because it's like, they were looking out for me because they knew I was like undervaluing myself so dramatically on this project that it would actually cause problems for them to quote so low, because then it looks like they're taking advantage of them, or it doesn't look like it has the right worth, like, how can we hire someone so cheap to do this project that actually matters to our company, Yeah,
it's kind of like an appearance thing. Like, yeah, I don't know, because they're like, early on you're like, am I like, kind of like, we call it like McDonald's price, like, or are you a car mechanic price, or are you like a contractor price or a lawyer price, and so you just have to figure out what cost you are. And
because the people will treat you differently. If you say it's
unfortunately
$100,000 to talk to me for a week, they're going to come in super prepared, and they're going to have stuff, and then you can really talk as professionals. They're going to listen to what you say. They'll probably even do what you say. It's just that's a thing, but you have to be able to pull that off. So you can't. I'm not saying people with 1 year of experience should try that, because it probably won't go very well for you.
Right.
Yeah,
you gotta have a few credentials under the belt.
Yeah, indeed.
Yeah. So I wanted to talk about the podcast, the Shop Talk Show podcast, because you're almost at 500 episodes. I just listened to 498, another great episode. And what are you planning for the big 500?
Oh, you'd think it would be something.
And
oh boy, those plans, they are hot, I'll tell you. I don't know, Chris, like you've kind of said, just we don't have much of a plan.
We've never once did anything special at 100, 200, 300, 400. Well, some of them we acknowledged, and some of them we just bowled right through, I think. But this one does feel like a big one, with it roughly representing 10 years and stuff like that. What I think will be fun is to kind of chunk them up into 100, 200, 300, 400, and like look back and get the vibe of what was happening during those chunks of time, because it was really interesting. I mean, there was long periods of time where all anybody wanted to know was like really specific stuff about WordPress. That's like all that we got. We had to make an FAQ page that's like, here's some basic WordPress FAQ stuff, that because we just can't answer it anymore, people will go nuts. We'll go nuts, And there's like some, there's other things like that. The very, very early days where, a lot of us embarrassing ourselves with certain things, probably getting guests that were too big for our britches and things like that. It'll be fun to reflect on some of the bigger moments of Shop Talk Show, but I'm more interested in the trends of like what happened during those couple year periods that dominated the conversation. Because I'd like to think that it's partly our journey, but partly reflective of the industry as a whole, because the show's a write-in show. So it's not only out of our brains, it's what's happening in the industry.
Yeah. I have big plans for episode 30 of my podcast. So maybe a cake.
No, you should. I for serious, like get into celebrating milestones. It's probably one of the things we haven't done enough, but they're fun.
Oh.
It's, you I don't know, you start off making a podcast. I always say get to 10 episodes, figure that out, and then
Do you guys know about the Laura Hogan donut thing? Is that just
Yeah.
like common knowledge in the world? Y'all both know what I'm talking about. Good. So
Yep.
I don't have to dig too much into it. But for your audience, Laura Hogan is just a great person. Just has written all kinds. She was just deep in tech stuff for a while in the performance world, and then has recently kind of stepped deeper into like management stuff. But I think she even has a public page on her site of when something really good happens, I go eat a dang donut. And I'm not giving away too much. She doesn't look like the kind of person that eats a terribly lot of donuts, so I can tell that this is a special thing for her. But it's a metaphorical, it's a real donut, but it's also a metaphor saying this thing really, I'm going to stop and have a breath and do something special for me, because that was a big deal and mattered. And I've known about it forever. I really like the concept, and I never do it. I can accomplish something huge, and immediately my dumb brain is just like, I'm behind on writing blog posts. Okay, I only wrote 2 blog posts this week. What is happening? I need to get on that. I celebrate nothing, and that's not good. That's not something to be. I should go get a donut, or whatever my metaphor of a donut is.
I started, like, because she was on our podcast in like episode 59. I'm looking back through it, episode 59. So that would have been the second year. I started doing milkshakes. Whenever I give a talk or do a demo, like at work or whatever, or for a client, like a big client demo, milkshake. Getting a milkshake, just the biggest, dumbest one. And like my kids are like, "Oh, no fair, I didn't get a milkshake," and I'm just drinking it in front of them. I'm like, "You did not give a presentation, kid," So, but no, I'm just kidding. But you gotta celebrate. Build something. I don't know. It's fun. So I'm getting a milkshake when we record 500.
I like that one because it's not like, you have kids, right? You can't be like, "Oh, I did it, I'm going skiing," or something. Then you're like stepping away from some other responsibility and whatever. But a milkshake, anybody can do that. Drive through.
So, as I listen to the podcast, I enjoy when you both mention accessibility. I'm in the accessibility space, and I have been for, I guess, way too long at this point. But I think we all need to talk about accessibility a lot. So, and especially from the start. When it comes to design, at the beginning or development throughout the project, what are you both doing? Because I mentioned this on practically every episode that I can, that it pertains to. What are you both doing to practice accessibility, and what would you say to those starting out their journey as far as implementing or learning about accessibility from the start of their projects?
I mean, I can go. Like, accessibility is one of those things that I learned way too late that I wasn't doing. You know what I mean? Like, I'd read Zeldman's book, and you read it and it's like, good HTML is makes accessible websites. I'm like, heck yeah, thumbs up. That's why I won't do Flash anymore. That's basically easy. Okay, I don't do Flash anymore, and I'll tell everyone we don't do Flash anymore, and they'll get really mad at me. But hey, we did it. We made a positive choice. But for me, it was kind of like the nuance in accessibility kind of got me. It was like, well, you can't use that color on that background, and I'm like, what? Like, like, how do I figure this out? And the answer is always like, pull out the color contrast picker and pick the colors. And it's like, I'm not gonna do that for every color. I like you guys and everything, but I'm not doing that for every single color combination on the page. That could be thousands, millions, I don't know, of variations. So I have like really enjoyed the new automated tools that have come. I say new, but we're like 5 years into this whole era, right? Like Axe, obviously. What I'm trying to think of, like Tenon has one, but even like WebAIM, the like Wave. Is that what their tool's called? Wave?
Yeah. Yep.
Like those
The
are
URL in, click a button, tell me what's wrong.
yeah, like a bookmarklet almost, I think. And it's just like, and it'll like overlay all these like broken kind of things. Oh, and accessibility insights from Microsoft is another really good banger. I've been really trying to use these tools like in like daily practice, running Lighthouse audits, which runs Axe under the hood, just so that I have not a like I'm not like I think for me it's just having a pulse on what's wrong and how out of control it's going to get, because for me a lot of my work is sometimes like client based, or it's like I have a client and okay, the color combination you somehow chose, I was not involved in the process, but the color combination you put I don't know, now the very recent example, now the website is just a bunch of H2s that are links. Okay, this is not great, but let's like, at least I can like audit these things and I get a sheet of like what's wrong, like you have too many H2s or whatever, and I can kind of like start a discussion there with a little bit of data. Do they always want to fix it? I don't know. Sometimes they just want a binary, is this accessible, yes or no? And you're like, well, it depends to who, right? And so I like these tools because they give like a lot of yes and no's, which is what people are asking for, and then from what I understand, we cited this thing. It was a social media content person and she's blind and she wrote a post, and I cited it the other day and I found it and now I don't have it, but she cited a post called like 5 things I wish everyone knew, like when I'm using the web. Here's the 5 things that bother me.
Oh, I remember that. And she it was a video and she like busted out her phone and showed you and like, this sucks.
Yeah. And it's literally labels, heading structure, alt text, like the super basics that are all automatable and you can catch that. And then you look at like, I spoke at AxeCon this last year, which was a total privilege, or last year. And, it was Glenda Sims, Goodwitch. She kind of like was pouring over all the Axe data that DeQ has. And they kind of were like, automated tests only catch, I want to get this right in my brain. She's like, they only catch like 20% of the WCAG, right? So like, and so that's something you need to know. But representative of issues that are like the bulk of issues, they catch actually like 57%, the automated tests. So, and then if you do like the little walkthrough things that they have, like the manual tests, you can catch like 80%. So that was really encouraging to me because I always thought it was like 10 or 20%. But knowing now that it's just in the representation of issues, it's like 57. Isn't that better? Like you can just run a test and you made it 57% better if you just make it 100 on Lighthouse. That's pretty cool. I don't know. So I've been like really trying, for lack of a better term, lean into these tools and like use these tools. And I just hope they get better and I hope problems get solved more. And I want the web platform to solve some of these problems for us. No one should have to write tabs. So I'm working on that. So we'll see one day. So.
Yeah. What about you, Chris?
Yeah, I mean, Dave makes a good point about the tooling. That's so cool. I'm interested in also like not only the usage of them, but how can you promote the idea of like, how can it be easier to be when I do git commit that it runs? Like, can more projects leverage things like Git hooks and continuous integration to do those kind of things? Because that's what makes cultural change happen at the org. Yeah. If somebody wires up a thing that spits out a little automatic GitHub message that says like, oh, there's a color contrast issue here, or this input doesn't have a label, or whatever, there's an on-click handler on this div, who did that, dummy, that will change and then it'll like get fixed and then kind of like stay fixed. That seems pretty cool. Yeah. I don't know that I've done a lot of work promoting that or whatever, so I guess thanks for having us on your podcast to spread that up. But I think that's cool and good, and it seems like more people are leveraging that kind of thing. I mean, think of every site that's on Netlify. There's just zillions of, it really took over people's workflows in a lot of ways. And people like they see continuous integration for the first time because they're using Netlify, and they see those little boxes in your Git commits that say like your site has been built, or there was a problem building your site, or it's been built and now the preview is ready. Click this link and you can go see the preview. That's continuous integration. And it's not a terrible stretch to add one more little line to that thing that says it has passed Axe or whichever one you pick from the thing. Yeah, that's neat.
Definitely. So on the topic of front end, what are you both seeing as far as front end goes that's really stood out for you as being something that we've seen, 2021 or even going, I know it's early this year, but something that really stands out to you as being really cool, really awesome as far as the front end goes?
It seems like there's at least 3 projects that they have this weird quality of, we're going to make a static site for you with no JavaScript by default, but you get to bring whatever JavaScript framework you want with it. So there's this one called Astro that does that and has their own format. And they say, oh, you bring your solid components, bring your Vue components, bring your React components, whatever. And even if you put div on click, whatever on them, that's just going to be gone in the output, unless you put specific directives that say it's okay to work under these circumstances or whatever. That's pretty neat, but they're not alone. Then all of a sudden this one Isles dropped that's kind of Vue focused, but also says, hey, bring your Preact components, bring your Svelte components, whatever. We're going to do the same thing. And then there's Ben Holmes' thing, Slinkity, that brings those renderers hopefully, I think, soonish or something. I'm not sure what the state of the project is, but it leans into Eleventy. So Eleventy is this great static site generator, no JavaScript by default, but supports only what I might call kind of like old school HTML processors like Nunjucks, which is like, I kind of like Nunjucks, but like literally nobody works on Nunjucks. I don't think the future is super bright for Nunjucks. But the future is super bright for React still, like it or not, because a zillion developers know that syntax. So how cool is it that there's this project? It's like, fine. Write your components in JavaScript, but we're still going to barf it out as static HTML. That's good it's probably good for accessibility. I mean, it depends on how you write that HTML and all that, but at least it's not requiring JavaScript to load that could die and yada, yada. Good for performance, all these reasons, like do the right thing by default is so cool. It's cool to see at least 3 projects go that way. And it seems like what people latch onto are those ideas more than the framework itself. They're like, whoa, that's cool that framework can do that. I wouldn't doubt that we'll see more frameworks adopt that. Like, I don't care how you write components. We'll take whatever you want to throw at us. And I think that's great. It leverages people's knowledge kind of in a good way. Like, we'll meet you where you are and we'll still do a good job for you. And what I like about it is it brings more people into the idea of building sites with components, which isn't particularly new, but it's a little new for people that aren't necessarily JavaScript people. JavaScript people just have it good with componentry, and that shoehorned its way so nicely with design systems, because design systems are like, here's the components that build this design system. But design system people don't always care how you build the component, but it just so happened to be this like movement that happened at the same time as, JavaScript based sites were becoming the most popular way to build a site. So you're like, cool, the designer's going to build a tabs component, which Dave is saying, I hope you don't have to, but for the moment you basically do. I'll build that as a capital T tabs component in Vue or whatever. And those two things are like matched up to each other. But it turns out that it's nice. It means you can isolate your JavaScript that has to do with tabs into that tabs component. It means you can isolate the CSS that has to do with that tabs component into that component. And you have these little boxes of componentry. And it turns out like, that's just a really good idea. I think it's just a good idea, period. I think it's unfortunate that that's not the first class citizen for how we make all websites. It bums me out when I go back to my old school WordPress site that I'm not building in componentry in that way. It just makes sense conceptually. It makes sense as like a paradigm way of programming. It's like, this is how digital products should be built. I don't really care about the language or anything. I just care about that. Give me a box that represents this concept on this website and I will use it.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. There's like with this, like Astro, we'll just call it, it's kind of the entity that's kind of inspiring some of these thoughts. Just like there's a bit of a swing in front end away from like single page appy kind of stuff. Because now I can have interactive components and I can use React without it being the whole entire site takeover. There's a lot of, it has become infinitely easier to use this stuff outside of a giant React app like context. Because I mean, like, you know, that you may actually want to use like React tabs for your tabs component, because guess what? It's been tested. Like a lot of people have used it. Like it hopefully has really good accessibility. Like, you know, like there's like, but to use React tabs 2-3 years ago, you'd have to spin up a whole React situation in order to like get it stuck onto the page, and that'd be a lot harder. So I feel like this is just, I don't know, a good kind of novel invention that we can use different tools now simultaneously. I could have Svelte tabs, I could have React tabs, and I could have Vue tabs all on the same page. Why would you do that? I don't know, but you could now. So it's theoretically possible. And so, and the like under the hood, there's been a lot of like ES build we talk about a lot on Shop Talk. It is like it basically is lightning fast Webpack, and it can build this stuff so incredibly fast. And the projects that are being spun off of this, like Vite, which is from Evan Yu from Vue, Vite is just a lightning fast local development server, and it can bundle your stuff and split it up and spit it out. Even last week, we found out, or we talked about Parcel is another like bundler, JavaScript bundler, process CSS as well, but it has a new CSS processor built in Rust, and it's like under 4 milliseconds to like compile CSS into like a full like bundle. That's incredible. Like in the blink of an eye, literally one frame on a 60 frames per second, you can have new CSS. One frame of like 60 FPS display. That's incredible.
So I wanted to touch on CodePen for a little bit. I have been a CodePen Pro user for like maybe 3 years now, and I always do like testing and everything on there, and it's great.
Well, thank you.
Thank you for making a great tool for me and for people. Do you have anything as far as CodePen coming up for people that we can look forward to that you can talk?
Well, that you can talk about is a clutch answer to this. And I know that makes for a bummer podcast when you're like, no, not really. But of course we are. I mean, if you've been following CodePen closely, you probably are aware that we haven't dropped anything super big in like a while. The behind the scenes from that isn't that we're just like, we don't care about this app anymore. We work. There's a team behind CodePen. We work on it all day, every day. It's still a highly active project. It's just that we haven't dropped anything huge and obviously user facing in a while, because there's, you know, in an app that's 10 years old, as CodePen is, there was some technical debt problems to address. You know, we just dropped a podcast where we switched our whole database from MySQL to Postgres, which is like, you know, a relatively large undertaking that nobody cares about. That affects Todd Libby's life in no way, you know, but we did it because we have reasons. We needed to prepare for this and that. And there's all these features of CodePen that need support and maintenance and nurturing over time. And if you make the wrong choices, you pay for those, yada, yada, yada. So we get done with projects like that. But the real news is that the most of the time is going into like, what is the next generation of CodePen going to be like? Like, how can we really like reinvent what CodePen can do, addressing the things that we think users will want to do, but doesn't turn its back on anything that, you know, because wouldn't that be a bummer too? Have you seen apps that do that, where they, you know, they're like, we don't do the thing that you've paid for it to do anymore. We do this totally new thing, Pivot Town, bye-bye.
Right.
No, I mean, CodePen has been really good to us for a long time, or was able to, quit job, and we have full-time employees. I mean, there's nothing to be except for proud of what CodePen has done now. So we're looking to like retain that, like the ability to just go to CodePen, start typing some code, start seeing the result of it, having that great moment that people have with code where you're like, wow, I can make a website. I can type an H1 tag and it's a big bold header, and I can put a picture of my cat and it'll show a cat there. And now tooling of websites exists that is so good that you can essentially click a button and literally make it a real website. Things like Netlify that I already mentioned, whoop, blast that thing up there, or any number of lots of hosts that have trivialized hosting lately. I think that's cool, and I hope CodePen is a part of that movement going forward as well. Like why don't we, you can do that in CodePen now, make a little cat website, but deploying it's kind of a different story and all that. And that's not all what we're working. I want to be like, but what about all these hot tools? We mentioned Astro a bunch. I think that's fairly obvious. Why can't CodePen run Astro? It can't, if you're asking today, right now. So those are the kind of some obvious things. And I can't even promise that when this launches, it will necessarily have Astro. Those are the types of things we're thinking about and prototyping and moving forward on. Because when we release it, you start getting old, Todd. You start thinking about your life a little bit. What am I even doing here on this one spin around this rock, or whatever the metaphor it is? I want to make sure that what we're doing matters. Because if it doesn't matter, I want to do something else. Because at some point you just get too old and you're too tired and you stop caring or whatever. Like I'm worried that I want to make sure that the hours I spend in the day matter. And so we've taken that into account on what we're doing at CodePen. This is a very intentional swing on something that we think matters for us and for people that use CodePen in the world, hopefully, and all that. And I have nothing else to tell you. I can't show it to you. I can't, because I'd be doing a disservice, because I don't know if it will ship in that way, or I'll get people excited about one thing and then we won't be able to ship that thing or whatever. It's not me being cagey. It's me being like protective of disappointment and stuff, and adding stress to a situation that doesn't need any more stress. So that's the case. Is there a new world? I get to work on it and look at it every day and think about the nuances of all these little aspects and such. And it's just such a fun thing to work on. But yeah, that's it. So yeah. Stay tuned. You might even want to go pro now, because I'll tell you, when this thing drops, if all the talk is this is going to be so much more valuable of a tool that it's going to cost more money. So you might as well be on a grandfathered plan like Todd is. Just saying, listeners.
Definitely.
Nice. Leaks. I was gonna say, it's a really, like you said, it's a tool like people like typing in H1 and like enjoy. I've like made websites with my son who's like 8, and his cousin, the first thing she writes is, my mom has big poops, I think, or something like that. And I'm just like, another generation learns.
Yeah.
And it's a great,
it's been fun to watch, not as we haven't released a lot of very new dramatic software, is that it hasn't mattered all that much. Is that it hasn't changed a whole lot of, it's not like people are like, screw them, like, there's not people aren't upset. If anything, they're just more comfortable with it and almost trust it more, because it's just this thing that reliably does what it does. And even that reliability has been a big factor for us, and that a lot of that work we do behind the scenes is like, what if we get this replicated across zones, and what if we deal with these 15 bugs that have been sitting here forever, and what if we just do all kinds of really things to shore up the back. So even if you don't notice, what you might notice is that it just never fails you. It's just such a solid thing that just sits there and works and tries to not cause you bugs, because we get a lot of support tickets. And so if we solve the root of that support ticket, then we don't get that support ticket anymore. And if you do that 1,000 times, you have this app that people understand.
And then our company of 7 people can continue to be a company of 7 people or whatever, right?
Yeah, that isn't losing their mind.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thanks for asking.
Yeah, definitely. I know listening to the podcast, the last episode you guys did, and I'm a frequent checker of lineups on the Event Apart website. I know you'll both be, get my English right today, in Seattle in April. And can you give us anything about what you're going to talk about? I know that, Chris, you're going to be talking about front end dev, and Dave, you're going to be talking about web components. Is there anything that you can go in a little bit of detail about those talks?
Yeah, we got an email, a bummer email yesterday that said they're gonna pull that sucker online, which is everybody's a little bummed out about, but or maybe they're very happy about it. I don't know. I'm a little bummed out just because I'm, just from a mental perspective of like, oh, my friends, that'd be cool. I don't want to put anybody at risk or anything, and this was a very risk-based decision, so be it in that way. But yeah, it sounds like we're going to be pointing the camera at ourselves one more year. Yeah, Dave, you go.
Yeah, well, so I guess it was like, I've written about web components before, or like quite a while ago, but last year I joined the Web Components Community Group, which is a W3C group, kind of trying to fix all the, how should I say, politically, marketing problems that have arisen from the overzealous sort of evangelism from certain browser companies about web components. And so I've joined this group, and for me, like, I was kind of a late adopter of JavaScript based systems, like component systems. Why didn't I use web components? Like, they're basically that, but in native platform level stuff. There's a few reasons, and I kind of go over that in the talk, but it's really just kind of like looking at this is HTML. You write your own custom elements with web components or not, but like you write your own custom elements, and you can give HTML. You're still authoring in HTML. You're still using HTML. You're still using like native JavaScript DOM. You're not using like a virtual DOM. You're just using HTML as Sir Tim Berners-Lee intended, and I feel like there's a lot of advantages to that. So I'm basically doing a talk about web components in the way I feel like I understand web components. First, like I do it from like concentric circles. Like first, like the base is like HTML, understanding how do I even use a web component with just HTML, and you can import a script tag and use the element. Any like web component on the web should work kind of like. And then the second question I have is, how do I style an element with CSS? And this is maybe one of the biggest gotchas with web components, is how to style them, because it can be a major foot gun. And then level 3 is like, how do you write your own custom element with JavaScript? How do you make your own web component with JavaScript? And it's not the nicest API, like for coding, like way to like program a component, but there's libraries, and it was actually designed to have libraries built on top of it. That's one thing you got to know. So there's libraries to help you author these things a lot easier and kind of make sense of things in a really nice way. So that's kind of what I go through in the talk. And then I'm actually going to do a workshop too for front-end masters, and kind of on the same topic. So that'll be a more like, let's get our hands dirty and do this kind of thing. But yeah, so I'm excited to talk about it. I think it's a big year for web components. That's what I'm saying. So yeah.
I think that's cool. I think what's cool about them, I think especially, is that they win. And that we've been, both of us, I think, highly critical of aspects of them over the years, and yet here they are. And now that they're in the web platform, they cannot go anywhere. The web doesn't just remove stuff like that. So yeah, here they are, and it's not even a get used to them, as they literally are getting better.
They are getting better, and I think the Shadow DOM, which is a part of web components, it's like the encapsulation, like I think of it as like a shell of an egg, things don't go inside of it and nothing leaks out of it. The Shadow DOM there, it was confusing, but I think at this point, when you see all the developer tooling built around like preventing bleeding and creating encapsulation and stuff like the style components, all this stuff, like, guess what? It's all built into the shadow. It all exists and we can use it today. There's a few,
it's probably its top strength, right? All that.
yeah, now it becomes a superpower, right? Where when it first like came out, it was like major foot gun, but now it's kind of its superpower. It's at no other component systems have this. They could, but then they would basically be web components. So, but it might be a cool thing for JavaScript framework to like turn it off and on. That might be a cool thing, but they don't. So
yeah, certainly there'll be a bunch of accessibility considerations, because it's like, wow, there's all these little DOMs stitched together. I hope they behave. I hope nobody even notices.
Yeah, fingers crossed. And there's a few gotchas with accessibility, and there's like focus management is kind of hard. Like if I go tab, and then I open like a emoji picker, guess what? The focus, where's the focus go? And then how do I remember to go back to web component link 400? Because my web component, when I hit close, I can't go back to document.act development, or like, I guess document.previously act development. I don't know. So like you have to, focus management is hard in JavaScript. And now we have these kind of boundaries to kind of jump through. People are working on it, and I think it's possible, but it's just that like gotcha where it's like it's hard, and it's also hard in web components. I guess it'd be how you, and then like form data, like one thing you would do is my input element, right? And my input takes label as a attribute, and then in my web component, what spits out is a label and an input, right? So, or my text area spits out a label and a text area.
Sure, React people do that all the time. Make one input that spits out both,
And you can do like error handling and stuff in there too. Like, so it's like boom, 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 like all encapsulated into like one element, right? One little line of HTML.
Yeah, but how does it tell its parent form the data that it has to submit?
And so that's the problem, is like the first gen couldn't. And so like the form would just be like, I don't know what you mean. So, but now you can use this thing called element internals. So it's like if you write an input in your web component, it'll like grab the idea of a input, attach it to that behavior. But then there's another thing called form data. So like, when you like, I don't know if your audience has ever done this, but like when you submitted a form in like PHP land, and you like in PHP, you'd like echo post or something, and like just see what it was sending, because it sends like a formatted sort of array. So now you can like add data to the form data, which is what posts, which is what the form is going to send when you hit submit. So kind of like a React component, or like you're just building up JavaScript, you're just adding and removing from a JavaScript object. You're not like, I don't have to like manipulate some weird whatever variable that then I have to then intercept and spit out, it's like I just add and remove to this form data object. So it's, again, this is not my like, I need to like really hone in, especially if I'm doing a workshop on it, like how this all works and how, because my brain's always like, how does it fail exactly? Like, why do web components and React components not quite work? I'd really like to know, but it's anyway. So I need to like get more exact on this, but there's just a few gotchas in accessibility world. So yeah.
No doubt.
So I got to ask these questions because I'm kind of curious. Chris, why would you rather be a graphic designer?
It's just jealousy based, Well, I think when you see some like great design, that like it like in the end it looks obvious, but it's so beautiful and so cool. I feel like that's like, I just wish I could do that. It's like jealousy, like, oh my God, it's so awesome. I wish that was my, I wish I could do it. That's all really.
Yeah.
I don't know. The money's quite there.
That's how I feel whenever I look at Dan Cederholm's fonts that he's releasing. And it's like, it's yeah, I know the feeling. So
he's prolific. Everyone he makes, I'm just like, he made another good one.
Yeah.
Does he make bad ones that I don't
don't-
need to see. And so we should
I don't-
message him.
I don't think so. I've had him on and we talked about his fonts. And then I think shortly after that, he released another one. And I'm like, man, I think I might be keeping him afloat with all the stuff I buy
Nice.
from him.
You need to get on the affiliate, get those affiliate links going.
I gotta go
Exactly.
listen to that, but did you ask him about it feels like such a, I don't know, there's like infighting and stuff in that world, just like there is in any other, people getting snarky with each other and stuff. And I feel like a criticism I've heard, like why don't you just grab a font off DaFont, whatever, there's a million fonts on there, they look great. And the reason that you don't is that people are like, well, they don't, like care isn't quite put into them in the same way. And even if they are, the chances of it just being just like the English capital letters are pretty high, and that there's no way they thought about the same way that you got to think about accessibility and internationalizing website. You kind of have to deal with that for a font too. Like, isn't it unfair if you have a special accent character in your name, but you downloaded some font that just doesn't have that? Or worse, it just maps it to that character that doesn't have the accent character on it in some way. And so I'm not trying to call out Dan, but I wonder what he thinks about stuff like that. Or maybe his fonts just absolutely have every single possible character that matters like that, or does it kind of not matter when it's just a novelty font, or what?
I don't know about the novelty. He has a couple, maybe a few actually, that I can think of that they have a pretty extensive special care, I guess, lineup,
Right.
you could say. I mean, this last one, the cartridge one. And then
He's got one called Captain Edward that looks super cool, and just a cursory glance, he's got all the accent characters in there.
Yeah.
So
I mean, he's very thorough and that he's probably got them all covered. I have them all, and I should know this, but
Oh, and I think it's too it's we've actually Paravel has worked with a couple typographers, people who make high-end fonts, and I tell you that these are not always, but it takes a bit of type A. I'm gonna make this really good, because you kind of are in a situation where you ship it once and it goes out to 1 million people, and they'll either use it or not use it, or yell at you if it's something's even. You're sending it to designers who are the dorkiest dorks about fonts, and they're going to give you feedback on the S, because the whatever curvature is 8.3 degrees off on the S, and whoa.
yeah, they go all in on the critique.
Yeah, I mean, have you ever watched, what is that logo, the brand where they review the logos? They're when somebody does a logo redesign and they compare the logos. Oh,
I know what you're talking about too.
I can't remember. Anyway, there's a website for, anyway, people just give the most nuanced feedback. Anyway.
So now I got one more question for you, Dave. And how good is the Japanese?
まあ、普通だよ。何年前 ?15 年前。日本から帰国しました。それで、どんどん忘れちゃった。So I have over the last 15 years since I've left Japan, slowly forgotten all my Japanese, and it's getting worse and worse and worse. And I don't know, what can you do? That's maybe you think I learned a language and I should know it forever, but that's not how human brains work unless you learn it before the age of 7. So I don't know. Ideally, I could get into some Japanese conversation or something like that regularly, but I probably
watching
don't.
anime doesn't help.
Watching anime does a lot, which is fun because I just watched one, which this is a new anime podcast now, called Komi Can't Communicate. And it's about this girl, high school student, who has a huge fear of public speaking or talking to anybody. It's on Netflix. But anyway, so she writes a lot of her like notes. And so she like write in a notebook and show it to the person. And I did a lot of like pausing to like read the actual note and then read the translation and kind of judge what I thought about it. And so that was fun. So, but anime helps. I get into a more Japanese mood if I watch anime. I get more like it's exciting. And I like it. There's a lot of nostalgia. Natsukashina. Yeah. Nostalgia about Japan itself inside anime. So
we should go sometime. I should make you drive around Japan on trains.
Oh, that would be so great because we'll have fun. So I know some Japanese drinking songs. We're gonna be in good shape. It'll be a good time.
Yeah, and you could do a shop talk show from the Tokyo Dome.
I know what they haven't called us, but I guess they will. We should put a broadcast out. So if anyone wants us to come to Japan,
So as we come down on time, I want to ask these 3 questions I asked all my guests when they come on the show. So I will ask you, number 1 is, and short answer, long answer, doesn't matter. What about the web these days excites you and keeps you excited in what you do?
Good question. Well, I think the tooling is getting better, like we said. And that's actually, I live for the day where it's easy to make a website again. So I want to do that. I don't know. The thrill of self-publishing is still there for me. I don't know if it is for y'all, but just that you hit publish and it's out, Couldn't do that before. Not with
such a good one.
Not with books or music or any, but now guess what? I click save and it's out, and that's too cool.
Yeah. Truly. I'm still just so curious if it's weird to say this, but is the web going to win? Which seems like a weird question because you're like, I don't know, how could it lose? But you're like, I feel like it could still lose somehow to some deeper play into native apps or some weird takeover of metaverse crap. If it turns out the Zuck was actually right somehow, and that's all we do now is just that, or whatever, and then websites don't make their way into that world quite well enough that they get forgotten or whatever it will be. It would be a long, slow decline, but it doesn't seem like that. Is that where the web is headed, or is it on the way up? And I kind of want to, something about me makes me want to fight for it in a way that's hard to articulate, because it's not even like my career is attached to it, but it wouldn't have to be necessarily. I'm sure I could do something else valuable in the world of computers or something else, but I don't want to. I'm excited about sticking up for the web and making it better.
Definitely. If there were one thing you could change about the web that we know today, what would that be?
Man, these are tough ones. I'm gonna go. Okay, I'm gonna go controversial. I think we need to radically eliminate some of the nuance from accessibility. So I think there's way too many questions for your average Joe or Joanne developer to know, or designer for that matter. And so it just needs to be simple and anyway, I'm hopeful it's those questions are and there are situations of course you can't answer, but it would just be really cool to have kind of sorted out. So yeah.
So if there were one thing you could change about the web that we know today, what would that be?
I kind of want to pick on Dave and be like, I wish I liked web components a little more than I do.
How would we make them better? What needs to be better?
The HTML instantiation would be nice. Mm-hmm. Having an official styling story would be nice. Mm-hmm. I don't know.
A global styling story.
But an internal styling story and an external styling story. They need 2 stories. One of them is, well, how do I normally write CSS that doesn't leak out and the CSS doesn't leak in, because I think that's a good default. But then what's the official way of reaching inside a web component? Right now, there's a bunch of ways. There's the custom properties way and there's the part way. And I don't like either of them. I want there to be the I know what I'm doing way. Just let me reach inside this thing way. At least that's opt-in, because isn't there this concept of there's an open shadow DOM and a closed shadow DOM, but to me they're meaninglessly different and I don't get it.
Yeah, it only makes sense to people who, not even me, Google.
And it feels like in the weeds, but the reason I'm saying this is because I think digital products should be built with components. Mm-hmm. And I don't want to reach for third-party stuff to deliver me the DX of just the concept of using components in isolation. I think the web platform is absolutely at its best when those big things are answered by the platform itself, and that's the promise of web components. And I get stoked about them when Dave talks about them, and sometimes I struggle to explain exactly what I wish was better. And so some of it's just a weird gut feeling thing. Maybe some of it's just better marketing or whatever, like Dave said, but I think that would be a big deal for the web. Is it if somehow I was stoked about it and it was my default choice? I was oh, of course I'm going to wire up this website with components. But I just made this little dumb little website about breakfast burritos, right? And it's just simple. It's just some markdown files, and the markdown files turn themselves into card components on a grid of cards, and that's it. My brain didn't go, oh, obviously those cards should be a web component. In my mind, I was I'll just do it in Astro, because Astro will just make a real basic, capital C card component that'll take some props, and the designing story of that is great. And I can just put a style tag in there and it'll scope the styles to it, which is kind of how I prefer to operate even on little baby websites. And that tool solved the job for me in a way that I wish I didn't have to use any tool.
The last question I have for today is this: favorite part of front end development you really like to nerd out over?
I like CSS tricks.
Good answer. Yes, good answer.
Yeah,
that's a good one. I don't know. For me, I have so many different, I think just through client services, I've messed with almost every piece of the web platform, and there's really weird ones I wish I spent more time in, like Canvas or something like that, or the web audio API or something like that. So yeah, that's interesting. I don't have a really good answer. So I do.
We have a whole podcast on it, so we get to nerd out all the time.
Yeah, I do like web performance. I like thinking about web performance. I like measuring web performance. So that's maybe something I geek out on quite a bit, or want to know. So yeah. Did a new website builder come out, and did I run perf tests on it today? Yeah. Did I spend way too much time? Yeah, I did. Did they only score 76? Yep. So it's stuff I do is, I don't know. I'm just I don't know. I like it. I like to measure that stuff.
So I'd like to close the podcast with letting my guests know, let the listeners know what they currently have going on and where people can find you. So, and I know that, I don't know, maybe all 7 people that listen to this podcast, no, there's more than that actually, but know you fairly well. But yeah, what do you have going on? Where can people find you?
I can go first. I'm daverupert.com and Davatron 5000, DAVA TRON 5000 on Twitter, GitHub, etc. And I'm working on an app called Luro app, and you can check it out. Again, there's not much to see right now, but hopefully soon. So
yeah, cheers. Chris Coyier, my name, Coyier. That's me on Twitter.net is my personal website, and that's me on CodePen and all the stuff. I'm a big username kind of guy, which has been, it's tricky, it's not cool on Reddit. It's not cool in the Web3 world. You're not supposed to use, you're not even supposed to use your own face as an avatar anymore. I'm thinking it'll swing back though. I'm come on, personal brand, man.
trust. You got trust. You got also we do YouTubes. We started doing YouTubes over on the Real CSS Tricks YouTube channel. So if you like coding videos, we do those now. So
Awesome. So I want to thank you both for coming on today and sharing part of your day with me and answering all these questions. It's been a pleasure talking with you both and having you on.
Thank you.
It's all ours. I'll speak for David.
Thank you.
And thank you, listeners, for tuning into the Front End Nerdery podcast. I'll be back next time with a new guest, new conversation about front end design, development, or other topics. If you'd please rate this podcast on your podcast device of choice, like, subscribe, and watch on the Front End Nerdery YouTube channel. Links to transcripts and show notes are there. I'm Todd Libby, and this has been the Front End Nerdery podcast. Thanks, and we'll see you next time.